I've been looking forward to this panel since we put it together. I'm going to ask my panelists, Jim, Matthew, and Monty, to come on out and join me here while I give you a little context. So we put these conferences together, and we're often looking for interesting panel discussions to have. We tried something a little new this time, and we posted a bunch of questions that I'd like answers to online as part of a blog post. Sparked a lot of discussion, partly from these folks who went, what the hell are you doing putting the questions online? Partly from people who looked at the list and said, those are really good, hard, kind of incisive questions. Let's make sure we get them on stage. So to some extent, we're holding people's feet to the fire. But the thing I really want to discuss today and I want to tackle is we are clearly in the middle of a set of wars among the various computing stacks. You may have noticed that Eucalyptus just announced much closer alignment with AWS. Cloud stack, cloud platform stuff is growing, and Verizon recently forked that and started customizing it to offer value within their organization, but leaving open questions of how much of that finds its way back into the core of the cloud platform stuff. OpenStack sort of declared victory from a marketing standpoint, but at the same time, there are plenty of distributions out there. It looks like the early days of Unix right now to some people. And then VMware, which clearly has been the enterprise virtualization tool of choice, is now facing a world where most of its other competitors are open or at least making significant gestures in that regard. So hopefully we're going to get to some of that today. I got a long list of questions here. But first I'm going to ask my panelists to introduce themselves, starting with Monty.
Hi. Oh gosh. That's
sorry.
No, that's great. Fantastic. It's just my voice is so much louder than I was expecting it to be. I don't know why. I have a microphone on. So I'm Monty Taylor. I work for Hewlitt-Packard. Everybody in the world seems to have an OpenStack founder story, so I'll skip giving one of those. But I might have been around somewhere near the beginning of the OpenStack project, work on that, sit on the OpenStack Foundation board and the technical committee there, and pretty much spend all of my time either working on OpenStack or coming around and talking to find people about why they should. So.
My name is Matthew Lodge. I'm the Vice President of Product Management and Product Marketing for VMware's Infrastructure as a Service offering, vCloud Hybrid Service.
I'm Jim Anthony. I work for Verizon Terramark. I run the sales engineering team in North and South America. And in my spare time, I run around to trade shows and talk about cloud and the future and where it's all going.
All right, so I'm a networking person with a background in routers and tech like that. And I remember a time when the Cisco command line interface was like the default model for computing. And I remember Ascend sort of went in and implemented all of the CLI commands from Cisco, and that was what everyone learned. Are we in an era where Amazon's API is the CLI of the cloud right now, and everyone's sort of trying to figure out how to emulate that, how to look as close as possible to that?
It's an interesting question there. I mean, I was around at the same time, actually, at Cisco on the other side, and we were emulating all of the Ascend radius attributes so that we could try and catch up and eventually overtake them. I think the interesting thing, there's been this sort of idea that if you have the Amazon API faithfully implemented, then that's it. You're going to start to be tremendously successful in cloud. And we see with Eucalyptus basically taking that approach. That's not happening. Right? You're not seeing this enormous explosion in Eucalyptus use because they have the Amazon API. So there's clearly more to it than that.
Yeah, I actually in your blog post you mentioned the OS. We always like to do these metaphors of clouds as operating systems and everything, and the Eucalyptus guys very helpfully referred to themselves as a potential open source version of System 360. And
thanks for putting my mind right there.
Yeah, like I didn't. Yeah, just like right there, just hand it to me. But I think that's actually, I think it goes hand in hand. Like you can go off and try and make a thing that sort of tries to emulate 360. Maybe why wouldn't you just use 360? And how does that move you forward into the next thing? How does that allow you to innovate and take the next step and move the industry someplace? You're trying to emulate something that somebody's already built a successful business around. It's sort of the opposite of what you're talking about in your keynote a couple seconds ago. You don't want to tie yourself down into that mode.
Right.
I tend to agree with the other guys have said. The Amazon API set is, it's the mechanism for the 800-pound gorilla in the industry, and we have to pay attention to it. But we can't assume that it is going to be the one and only I don't think it will ever end up being like the Cisco CLI. We had the same issues before Cisco came around with SQL in the early 90s. You know, the same situation happened between Oracle and Sybase and Ingress, all those guys. You know, there's a standard that gets developed, and we're all going to look at those standards, but we all have to innovate. We have to keep expanding and going beyond the boundaries that are established by the gorilla.
Yeah, I think the other important thing is the Cisco CLI was a human interface, right? You essentially had a skill set for people, very different with an API. And you see things like JClouds and Fog and, you know, all of these cross-cloud libraries coming out, essentially abstracting away all of those differences. And you know, you look at even at the folks who are big AWS users like Netflix, built their own adaptation layers. Why are they doing that? Well, because they think at some point they might need to be somewhere else. Right?
So you've got the various stacks competing for your dollars and attention.
Yeah.
And then you have users building a layer of abstraction on top of it to allow market liquidity. Doesn't that put the owner of the stack and the user of the stack at sort of loggerheads where there's an arms race of I can change my stack and add custom features to make it better faster than you can keep up with the adaptation layer?
I think capabilities is a lot about what that is, because the specific API call to drive a capability, that's something that's going to go into a JClouds or a Fog, right? But your cloud has to have the ability to do the thing that your app is going to ask it to do. And I think that's where we're seeing the innovation. That's where we're seeing people put in the additional work. And so at the end of the day, I mean, the specific API you use to do that is it's gonna describe some semantics about how your cloud works. But it's really about what things can your cloud actually do for you. And you know, so a developer goes over and spends a day writing an API shell. Like that's not terrible.
So earlier in the speaker room, you were saying that that OpenStack is like 30% of what you need.
Yeah.
And that there's a lot of command and control layers and so on.
Yeah.
How many of those command and control layers exist today? How many of them are going to be built? I mean, it seems to me like if you're saying, hey, you should embrace OpenStack, it's 30% of what you need. That doesn't sound like a complete answer. And obviously, you'd like to take umbrage with that statement. So how much more is there to build before these things are ready for the world?
Well, I think it's a difference between having a stack of software and having a functional service. Right? If you're building a cloud service, then you need to have all of this automation on the back end around things like just bare metal provisioning. You've got to bring everything up. You've got to make it ready so it can be consumed by that cloud stack, that software, whether it's OpenStack or anything else. There's all the service management capabilities. There's all the monitoring. I mean, you ticketing, all of that stuff. None of that is in OpenStack, right?
Well, someone said to me, you can't even find out how many machines you have access to and how many of them you're using.
So
is that a fair statement or not?
So funny story. Thanks for teeing that one up for me there. I happen to have working for me the project technical lead of the OpenStack bare metal provisioning project called Ironic, because that's a great name. Because it's ironic, yeah. And then we've got a team of people working on a project called its code name is O, but it's the OpenStack deployment project. But it's actually very explicitly about using the cloud abstractions to deal with your bare metal layer, your provisioning layer. The folks at Red Hat wrote a tool that's part of that suite called Tuskar, not to be confused with Tosca, which is even more problematic if you have a New Zealander working on your project. They sound very similar. But Tuskar is actually that to get you into the visibility into what your bare metal situation looks like. So at that point, once you've got OpenStack dealing with your bare metal, with your data center, and then you're running OpenStack on top of that, your virtual one, then you actually do have the data available in your system to start digging into these things. Is it all ready yet? Like, can I hand you that right now, this instant? I mean, it depends on what you want. It works, but yeah, it's still getting there.
This feels like the old days when I used to go Unix, find all the distros, compile everything. Oh, wait, wrong compiler, didn't work, whatever. And then Red Hat showed up and said, here's a really ugly text-based interface. Oh, look, you have a working machine.
Right.
How long until we get that? Because it seems like that's the chasm crossing, this ain't just for carriers moment everyone's waiting for.
Yeah, so give me a couple months.
So so Christmas present, that's great. iPads and OpenStack for everyone.
Yeah.
So Jim, let me ask you, in this stack wars, you guys seem to be Switzerland. You're sitting squarely on the fence where most people get splinters saying, hey, we do Cloud Stack, and it's open, but we're also customizing it ourselves, and that's not open. We're going to keep it because it's better. And we also like OpenStack too, and so on. And so yell at me for putting words in your mouth, but tell me what it feels like to be Switzerland.
Well, we are Switzerland. We're developing a new platform right now that's in beta. We're trying to adopt the things that we need, the best of all worlds. I won't even say both worlds, but the best of all worlds, to bring an innovative product to market so that we can go chase down some of the competition.
So when you say innovative, what was missing with what you got from CloudStack, OpenStack that you had to go fix?
Well, it's not that there's things missing from those particular stacks. There's features and functions missing from the cloud itself. There's performance guarantees that customers are demanding. There's reliability guarantees that customers want. I want to be able to control and configure my IOPS at a virtual machine level. I want to control and configure the amount of networking bandwidth I assign to individual virtual machines. I may want more on one and less on another. So that it's those kinds of things that nobody else is doing in the industry yet that we're trying to get out the door, bring to market.
It sounds like, I mean, to be fair, Joyent was doing it with all of its Solaris-based stuff. Yeah. And I think some of my esteemed colleagues might like issue with that. But your point is that we don't have good fine-grained controls over performance and availability in the off-the-shelf open stacks that you've built on. Although apparently we're going to get them by Christmas, so that's okay.
No problem.
So how important is that? I mean, how much of a deciding factor is that when people come to you and say, look, I'd like to buy this, but if you can't guarantee me this? Is that in every RFP? Is it that you're no longer able to negotiate it away? How important are those things?
I think, if I can sort of paraphrase, I think what Jim is saying is like, this is really about customers, right? I wrote a blog post that got some attention last year about sort of the Cinderella and the Ugly Sisters, and that was really, it was not about sort of open source per se, it was about the folks who were arguing about how they were more open source than somebody else. It's like, but you just don't care about that. All they want to be able to do is run their applications.
Exactly.
I think that's what Jim's getting at.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, is if this application needs IOP guarantees, or it needs to have a certain amount of CPU, or whatever it is, that's what matters. And it doesn't really matter whether that's implemented in open source or something else. At the end of the day, if you can run the application, that's what fundamentally our customers are paying for.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter how it's implemented. It doesn't matter which stack it's implemented on. It doesn't matter which hypervisor is used to implement it. What matters is, do I have the feature and function? And then if I have the feature and function, can I take something that already exists on one of those other stacks, one of those other hypervisors, and bring it into the environment? And that's what we're trying to accomplish. So by playing Switzerland, we're able to surface all the different drivers for the different hypervisors, different stacks, and support existing virtual machines, existing workloads coming into the new environment.
Are you seeing more of these applications that have more serious performance and availability requirements? Is that an increased thing, or is it like, are people now saying, hey, take all of my workload, by the way, these have more baggage than the old ones?
So there's not an all concept yet, but there is a more and more concept. So absolutely, we're seeing more and more customers come to us saying, okay, we've been in the cloud now for 3 years, we've put this app in, that app in, we're ready to go deeper. We've built a level of trust, we trust the security, we trust the company that's delivering the platform, we trust the location where it's being delivered from, the certifications, the audit requirements, all those other things are being met. Let's go deeper. I'm ready to put maybe not the corporate crown jewels into the cloud, but I'm ready to put a couple of other more important applications into the cloud. Let's take the next step. And they need these types of features and this type of openness, support from all different kinds of hypervisors, all different kinds of stacks to be able to accomplish that.
So just to be clear though, openness meaning broad support, not openness meaning source code visibility.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So I think that, I agree with a lot of the sentiment that it's certainly about the customers, and it's certainly about the customers being able to run their applications and meet their needs. I think that though there's a different set of, depending on who you're talking to and depending on what you're talking, you're just talking about them maybe not being ready to put their crown jewels into the cloud. Well, that assumes that there is a cloud and that they have to wait for them, they have to wait to trust the company that is providing them that cloud until they can do that. And I think that that's actually one of the things that we're trying to address in OpenStack, is to give one of the things that the customers really want is choice. Right? They don't want to be vendor locked in. They don't want to be vendor lock-in to, what is the past tense of vendor lock-in? They don't want to be locked into a vendor. I'd say vendor locked in. I don't know what.
I like the stream of consciousness.
Yeah, it's gonna be turned into an Allen Ginsberg performance up here, and I start throwing things. They want to be able to get their app done, but they might want to be able to do that in a consistent way across multiple vendors. They might want to buy cloud resources from HP and from Rackspace and from DreamHost.
So
right?
let me ask a question, because the word might terrifies me. I like the words will.
Well, so
right?
yeah.
So I've seen. I mean, when RightScale came along,
Yeah.
I'm going to throw lots of people under the bus right now.
Sure.
So when RightScale came along, it's because Amazon's interface sucked.
Right.
So there's an obvious need for RightScale. There's an old debate about whether technologies are roof racks or steering wheels, right? You buy the steering wheel comes with the car, the roof rack doesn't.
Yep.
And RightScale looked like a roof rack until Amazon introduced good management interfaces, and all of a sudden they're a steering wheel.
Yeah.
And so now a lot of these multi-cloud vendors are making up the multi-cloud idea. I get two clouds. I get a private and a public. I understand that, right? I'm not sure if I want to spend my day moving my workload from public cloud to public cloud because, as Dave McCrory puts it, the data gravity, the sheer, the coefficient of keeping all that stuff in one place, the gravity of all your data being in one place, and that's where it is, and that's where you chew on it, and so on, is overwhelmingly big that it takes like an incredible fit of pique on my part to throw it in the air and say I want to move stuff elsewhere. So how real is this multi-cloud stuff?
I happen to run a rather large cloud-based application. We use cloud tools to build OpenStack itself. So, and that's actually currently running across 3 different clouds. One of them is a private cloud, and 2 of them are public clouds.
So
and
from a DR point of view,
from a DR point of view, I mean, and not just to pull a random, it might happen. Luckily, it didn't happen to us, although we would have been protected if it had. But sometimes admins at clouds do silly things like accidentally delete your account, right? Like this is it may be a small percentage, but it's no matter how resilient the resources in the cloud are, it's like a SAN is a single point of failure. We all know that, right? Your SAN controller operating system crashes. It takes you a week to reboot your SAN, right? Like these are things. So you've got to have resiliency depending on the size of your app. If you're doing a small app, you don't need multiple clouds, but you're fine.
So the multi-cloud thing is actually about biodiversity.
Yeah.
You sort of you can overcome extinction by having good distribution of your species. Do you guys agree? Is multi-cloud a biodiversity play?
No, I don't know. I think that can be. I'm not, but I think in a lot of cases when we look at customers, there's a lot of horses for courses, where you've got a lot of VMware customers, large Wall Street banks, for example, running things like Monte Carlo simulations at places like AWS. Why? Because they can spin up 1,000 VMs in 2 hours and run that and just use spot instances, and it doesn't really matter if some of those go down and everything's fine. But when that comes to, say, their mobility application that they're building on top of their ERP system, that's a totally different story, and they're going to run that somewhere else.
Yeah, I totally agree with that.
Yeah, the multi-cloud concept it's real. As a service provider, we can all agree we would like for that to not be real. We want to be the one provider, right? But the fact is, it's real, and it's real for a lot of these reasons, right? Some service providers are better at delivering, transient applications that are oriented toward, instantaneous knowledge about churning through information. Others, very oriented towards certifications and audit and HIPAA compliance and things like that. So you've got customers are picking and choosing their cloud platforms to meet their needs. The
best slide so far, maybe as a service provider, we'd like it if multi-cloud weren't real, but it is.
Oh, it is real. I mean, let's face it.
Yeah.
Well, on the VMware front, it's like, hey, if you want to use your own data center, you want to use a vCloud provider, you want to use us, that's great. That's a win all round.
So tell me a little about storage. We talked about this earlier. I got yelled at for saying that some people were more or less flexible with storage, but quite frankly, looking at the storage options that are out there, when I look at Amazon, because it's kind of the menu of everything, it's like the Cheesecake Factory, right? The menu's huge. You can order anything you want.
They are the Cheesecake Factory. I'm total. Thank you. That's fantastic.
So on that list, you've got like 7 kinds of storage, right? You got Simple DB, you got Elastic Block Storage, you've got pure on object storage like an S3 and so on. Yeah. And it seems to me like when I look at private cloud stacks, it's like a much reduced sort of, to your point about horses for courses, there's a very reduced set of things you can do. And the strategies are either, hey, we're going to use something like Ceph or Swift and that'll be our storage, or, and we're going to emulate S3 and build up from there, or we're going to pass everything right through, go talk to your SAN as you always did. But it does seem to me that now that we've sort of winnowed the field to 3 or 4 private cloud stacks, the next stage is to winnow the field to a modest set of portable storage options, and that's not there yet. So is storage the next big battlefield for the cloud wars?
I think there's a lot of innovation that's yet to happen in storage. I think you make a good point that getting it down to a very simple set of services, that the challenge has been that they don't fit all of the use cases. And that's where you see, every single outage on AWS has been around EBS, right? And because that's when EBS goes down, everyone goes down AWS except for Netflix. And the reason Netflix doesn't go down is because they don't use EBS, and they won't use it for that reason, right? So that gives you some idea of the scale of the challenge but in the storage industry. But it's been about, you think about storage today, it's about LUNs and volumes. That whole paradigm has to change. Right? It can't be about LUNs and volumes. In the same way that networking can't be about frames on a wire, and it's not with the advent of SDN, and everybody's taking advantage of that because the abstraction that gives you is so powerful. The same thing has to happen to storage. And we're just kind of scratching the surface with some of the things like vSAN and some of the other technologies do very similar things. You take essentially distributed storage, you aggregate that up and make it available, make it look like existing storage. There is so much more work to be done there.
Yeah, I know that a lot of times, and this is I don't have data to back this up, but I know when people ask me random questions, I'll be giving a talk and they'll be like, oh, so can I do this with my cloud? And I'm like, oh yeah, no, that's not how clouds work, but thanks. A lot of that comes into the things, two questions come up a lot, either around databases or around file systems, really. Like they're usually not interested. A lot of the people asking sort of consumer questions, they want a place to put their data, right? And it turns out that having access to block devices that are connected to a large storage pool is great. But like if you got an app that's running across 1,000 nodes, and you sort of just want to get your data, and you want to write it from one and read it to another, then you're talking about like shared file systems. There's really not still a good story in that.
You need a message queue for that kind of stuff.
Yeah, a message queue for that. But they're also wanting the magical. I don't want to rewrite my app in terms of object storage and message queues. I want to just write it and write the file system. Same thing with databases in the clouds. You're like, oh, so if I just put my data in this thing that looks like MySQL, will the cloud just magically scale all of my shard, my stuff? And I'm like, well, yeah, when ponies and rainbows come in, like everybody wants that. And none of the answers for that are quite there. So these are the things where innovation has to still happen. It's what the customers want.
So
it's really hard.
That's a good point, though, because Gartner says that most of the infrastructure as a service adoption in public clouds is driven by developers. Yeah. Which would make sense because they're having to re-architect fundamental things to take advantage of sort of eventual consistency in a storage system, for example, or some NoSQL database or whatever, scale-out style infrastructure. Yeah. In enterprise IT, it still seems to be the IT department that's in private cloud that's making private cloud purchasing decisions. Yep. And they're not the ones that re-architect apps.
Right.
So, but they fundamentally have to provide infrastructure to satisfy their
Sure, but they're not going to rewrite it. So they're going to continue to treat it as rented metal, not a cloud, because they're the IT guys. They're not rewriting the app. They're not building the new app. They're taking that existing app and going.
But if they don't provide something developers can use, then they're irrelevant, right?
Yeah, then
they're irrelevant to future applications.
Yeah.
But to the existing ones, they're going to keep using them on the existing infrastructure.
Eventually, I mean, so if you look at what some of that cycle looks like, right now you got the developers saying, "Whoa, I can't wait 3 weeks for you guys to rack a server for me. Like that's just I can't do it. Sure. Like I can't meet that thing. So I'm just going to go off and I'm going to use my corporate card or I'm going to use my personal card as a manager and spin up some.
But the point is the developer needed a server, whereas a business unit user might need an account.
So now the IT departments are sort of in the position where they need to install a cloud. They don't really care, they don't want to, but they need to install a cloud, so the developers stop doing this, right? Once they do that, and once they've actually sort of been browbeaten into installing some clouds inside of their organizations, then they're going to have it there, and they'll be like, oh, wow, it's so much less work for me to manage this thing in this cloud that we like. If I've got to manage the cloud and these legacy things. How about if I just managed the cloud and started moving the things? So I think we can see I don't want to say the word trickle down, but like,
yeah, but at the same time, what you just described was IT going, here's some rented metal.
Yeah.
Because rented metal is easier than fixed metal. Mm-hmm. I don't want to call it cloud because they're still going, would you like VMs? The reason that infrastructure, that developers said, can I have a VM, is they wanted to build something new on a machine.
Right.
Whereas the traditional enterprise user is going to say, I want to write a script or I want to create a new account or whatever. The traditional business user using their old tools. The question for me is, when does the private enterprise say, oh, now that I got these rented machines, why don't I set up 3 kinds of object storage and a message queue thing? Mm-hmm. And like, if you look at App Engine has these features to like take an image and rotate it 90 degrees or crop it.
Right. Yeah.
That's a service, right? And I don't see I see the app developers when they move to the cloud in public infrastructure building IT as a service, with a series of function calls, each somewhat separate, kind of like what Amazon has done with its different services. But I don't see that happening on the private cloud. I see enterprise IT going, I got rented metal and storage, anybody want some?
But maybe that's the role for private PaaS.
Yeah.
Right? Because we have customers who do this today where the IT department manages and runs the VM infrastructure, and they run something like Cloud Foundry on top of it.
Right.
And so those two folks don't even have to talk to each other.
Yep.
Because the devs can just use the Cloud Foundry interface, the CLI, push their applications, That's all great. IT's still seeing all the VMs that get created as a result of that. They can monitor the health. They can look at the system as a whole. They can manage all that kind of stuff. Everyone's happy.
So except for the people in IT who are now out of jobs.
No,
they're not out of jobs.
Do you guys think this job of CIO is irrelevant, or is getting redefined, or is going to get subsumed into the different lines of businesses?
It's actually becoming more important. The CIO's got to know more and more about the business that they're in, and less about the technology that it takes to support it.
Yeah.
But at that point, aren't they like not the CIO but something else?
No. They need to help the company innovate so that they can continue to compete in their own industry. They will apply technology to do that, but that's the role of the new CIO. And we've been talking about that in our sales cycles in the cloud industry for the last 6-7 years.
But a lot of CIOs I know are very familiar with CMDB, for example, traditional enterprise IT. They're not experts in Jeffrey Moore's Crossing the Cavern and Clay Christensen's Innovators Dilemma. They're not innovation experts who understand 3 Horizons innovation portfolio management. That's a whole different skill set.
But the good ones are.
Someone else is going to get their job.
Well, yeah.
The good ones are.
Right.
Exactly.
I had a very large construction companies, and they sent me an email and said, we'd like you to come talk to us. And I thought they would, want to talk about cloud. I'm like, no, we don't need help with that piece. What we're really interested in is product management. So you run product management for a cloud organization. We think we need to hire and grow product managers.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because we need to understand our business at a much greater level and be able to do this synthesis task of what we hear from the business, but then what actually do we build for them?
Yeah.
Right? And that to me that's a great example of the kind of thought process for successful CIOs in those organizations.
So Linus was just talking at LinuxCon Europe. I believe it was yesterday. It's tough to tell with the time zones and stuff. But was talking there and basically said that the challenges they've got ahead of them in Linux is not the technology. Technology is just engineering. You just get that done. It's the organization. It's the social aspects. It's the process. How do you deal with that? So even at that level, and that's the thing that we spend a lot of time focusing on in OpenStack. We're very much looking not just at how can a developer get his work done in the quickest amount of time possible, but how can 1,600 developers work together? Because those are different things. Those are different. So as you grow organizations, you've got to learn. You have to manage these things. Learn about process. You've got to get excited about that. Because the technology is enabling us to move so fast. If you're not into process, you're sunk.
So Jim, do you see this shift from information officer to innovation officer in the people you're talking to in organizations?
Absolutely. I mean, we're talking to people all the time that are buying services from us that are doing it so that they don't have to think about deploying routers, deploying switches, making storage choices. They want somebody else to make those choices, manage those devices, manage those platforms so that they can stay focused on their business. How do I take the information that's being collected? How do I convert that into something that's useful back to the lines of business, the leaders within the business? How do I change my stance within the industry? Those are all things that they're trying to accomplish. We talk to those guys all day long. We have more of those conversations than the traditional conversations of, okay, I'm a NetApp shop, Cisco shop. I want to maybe buy some services from you because I run out of space, but I want to make sure that you're using the same technology that we're using. Those days are long gone.
All right. There's a couple of companies that aren't on stage with us today, not in a lot of room. But if you look at the world of enterprise scripting, we were talking about moving up the stack and not having to worry about hardware. There are legions of developers familiar with .NET. They built a ton of corporate IT. There's a slightly smaller group that's built stuff on Salesforce's Apex. So when you move up to platform as a service and sort of more abstracted scripting languages that can be handled in that way, companies like Salesforce, like Microsoft, have that higher level scripting stuff. Obviously, there's Cloud Foundry and there's other sort of higher level platform as a service technologies. That's somewhere I don't see a lot of innovation in OpenStack and Cloud Foundry. What are the equivalents in that world?
I'm not sure I understand. I mean, the Cloud Foundry guys support...
Sorry, Cloud Platform.
Oh.
Cloud Foundry is one of those, but it seems to me like Salesforce has Apex and to some extent Heroku. Yeah. Microsoft has the whole .NET stack. You guys have Cloud Foundry. I don't see the same innovation up the stack in an open way happening in the OpenStack and Cloud Platform worlds.
I think right now it's actually, so what we've been seeing with because we're a consortium of projects really, and as the way we've seen that grown has been from the really, really core infrastructure pieces, and then sort of we're going up the stack as the core pieces get more and more solid. And I think we're seeing, like, we've added orchestration engine this last cycle, and metering and things like that into OpenStack. We've got database as a service pieces coming, and when we talk about how those interact with PaaS offerings and the higher stack things, at the moment, rather than talking about being competitors to those, we want to enable those. We want to have.
Which ones do you want to enable?
I want to enable the ones that you want to run. Like I want the cloud to have the capabilities that these higher level app development engines need to do their job well.
Can you give me an example of an open source higher level app development engine?
Nope.
Isn't that a problem?
It's not the I want to make sure that the cloud provides the things that people need to write that, and then I want somebody to come along and do that. If there's a need, if there's an excitement about that, somebody's going to come and fill that space. I don't think that I don't think that that's. I'm not necessarily concerned right now that we have to have all of those pieces.
But Matthew just told us, and I sort of agree with him, that enterprise IT is going to run rented metal with some storage and say, here's a layer above that, line of business, go deal with that.
Yeah.
And then the line of business doesn't have to really concern itself with the underlying infrastructure as long as it's there.
Right.
There's a strong first mover advantage. Once you've written your code in Apex or you've written your code for Cloud Foundry or whatever, that's what you're using.
Yep.
So it seems like, great, we're making the lower level stacks open. Meanwhile, those lower level stacks aren't actually where the rubber meets the road in terms of business development. It's developers building stuff on public infrastructure as a service using cloud scale-out architectures, and it's the line of business and the internal groups building things at a higher level of abstraction on a proprietary framework. Isn't that a problem for the world of open?
I mean, yes, but to a degree, there's only, honestly, I think if you try and solve all of the problems at once, then you wind up solving none of the problems, right? Like if you go and you say, you know what we're going to do, we're going to go stem to stern the whole thing, and we're going to replace everything, and we're going to do all that. You don't.
Well, no. I'm arguing for layers. What's the platform as a service strategy for you guys, Jim?
Right now, it's a wait and see. So we're focused squarely in the infrastructure as a service space. We're going to keep our eyes on the different stacks that are developing, the features that come out of them. But as these platform as a service options start to surface, we're actually talking to a lot of different potential partners right now about
Is there a
deploying
path
their
that your
technology.
customers wind up developing?
Say that again?
Is there a path that your customers wind up deploying when you talk to customers?
Yeah, so we've got several customers that are already PaaS service providers themselves that are sitting on top of our infrastructure.
Okay.
So their customers are our customers because of them.
Sure.
But we're waiting to see what happens in the space. If there's, we're talking to some of the big guys you've already mentioned, Microsoft and Oracle and others, about offering some of their technologies as a service on top of our infrastructure. But we're focused on the infrastructure side for now. That could change over the next 12 to 18 months. We'll see what happens.
Yeah.
All right, Monty, I'll put you on the spot a little bit.
Great, excellent.
Actually, no, I think I'm going to start with you. I'll get to you in a sec. So orchestration platforms like CloudStack and OpenStack and things like that, they can manage you kind of from above. Hyper-V and KVM are undermining the margins for virtualization because there's open options out there. As CloudStacks and the virtualization component of CloudStacks go open source, you guys are glaringly the not open company on this stage.
Yeah, I think that's a little overstated. I mean, we just announced our results on Monday, right? And we increased margins and our licensing went up. We're a $5 billion company and we grew at, 16%, right? Which is incredibly difficult to do when you get to $5 billion. So this whole thing about commoditization is kind of somewhat overplayed. And at the end of the day, the one thing that VMware has done is made it very easy for customers to move somewhere else. Right? Because you look at the way that VMware functions, essentially we emulate hardware. We make it look, the whole thing about VMware is you don't have to change your application in order to virtualize it, right? So you're free to move it any time. It's not like there are hooks that you get into. It's not like you have to use a different programming interface to use VMware.
So VMware is the easiest cloud stack to leave?
Yeah, totally. VMware virtualization is the
I'm
easiest
just putting
thing to
the
leave.
tweets out there for people. Big letters.
It's like, you've been able to buy free virtualization for like the last, 6-7 years?
Right.
So, the free options already have been there there's nothing new there, right? So why is it that customers...
Are you ever going to open source the hypervisor?
So why is it that customers continue to buy VMware? It's because it solves the problem in the best way for them. And at the end of the day, that's what we have to do. We have to be successful that way. And the biggest growth area for us is the entire stack, right, the vCloud suite. Right, so it's not just the hypervisor, but it's all the things that turn your infrastructure into the software-defined data center. And really, that's where customers want to go. Because they see, back to Jim's point about CIOs, right? If you are not building this highly flexible, highly agile infrastructure to support applications, right? Software is the way that business people get into new markets, launch new products, go to new countries. If you don't have an infrastructure that can respond to those needs, then you're in trouble as a CIO and as an IT organization. And so software-defined data center is a really key part of what they need to be able to do to keep up.
And would you say that the desire to buy the sort of whole orchestration platform and stack from you instead of just the hypervisors is why you're able to grow margins, which, by the way, is pretty impressive?
Well, I mean, for some customers, that's certainly very valuable, right? There is definitely value to having a well-integrated offering. I mean, you see this playing out in lots of different markets. It's playing out with Apple versus Android, right, in that space, where, so Android has more market share, but Apple takes home the majority, 80% of the profit in that marketplace. Why? Because they have a better integrated solution, right? You see Microsoft taking that direction by buying Nokia, right? So that they can get a better integrated solution because clearly that's valuable. And so integration definitely has its place. And so it depends on who you are and what you need to do. And Jim mentioned this. A lot of IT organizations, like, where is the added value that I have spending all my time integrating stuff? It doesn't add any value to my business. Why am I doing that? And then you've got folks who that's incredibly important. And so if I would pick something like eBay or PayPal as customers who have got VMware Hypervisor, they've got OpenStack running on top of that, they're running Cloud Foundry on top of that, and those guys are building a very specific service. They have a very specific set of requirements in mind for that particular infrastructure, and they need that level of control and engineering.
All right. Good answer. Monty, let's talk about Mirantis.
Well, let's talk about Mirantis.
So folks at Mirantis and other companies are busy saying how much they hate CloudStack. They're on record as saying, we don't like CloudStack, we don't like CloudStack. Yeah. Mirantis is also claiming to have more revenue than all other OpenStack companies put together. It's an interesting claim. It's still early days, but do you think there's going to be a Linux in the current Unix universe of all the OpenStack distros?
So I think that, and that sort of hints actually also at that Randy Bias quote. I mean, between Boris at Mirantis and Randy at Cloud Scaling, we got some guys that can put out some quotes and some sound bites.
There's an idea for a panel. You need a cage fight. Boris and Randy. Right.
Yeah, that would be fantastic.
Can we get an octagon?
Yes, absolutely. So gosh. So I think that out of a lot of that talk is, and then the question about the distros comes this idea that that there wants to be a winner, right? That there wants to be the one true OpenStack to in the darkness bind them or whatever. And I think that actually goes sort of against the value proposition of
that's your tweet, by the way.
OpenStack.
One true OpenStack to in the darkness bind them.
Yeah,
that's probably yours.
That's the one that's going to haunt me.
I knew I should have brought my iPad out here. Yeah.
Gosh, I always say something. I think that goes against what we're trying to do. That if the idea is that customers don't want to be they don't want vendor lock-in, right? They want the ability to have an ecosystem on top of which they can run their apps and have that work in a sensible way. Then I think that having one OpenStack provider is the exact opposite of what we want to have happen there. What we want instead is actually for it to be less like the operating system market and think about the PC market. You've got like how many different IBM compatible. Remember back when it was about being IBM compatible? You've got so many PCs and servers that they're all x86 based. Now we've got some ARM based, but like the idea is that you can get all of these and you can run your OS, you can run your apps on them, and the vendors can sell you something. HP, turns out we sell that too. But we can sell you a laptop, but you can also buy a laptop from Dell, and those laptops are both probably going to work the same, except that maybe the mouse pointer will be a little bit fiddly. But you don't have to relearn what a laptop fundamentally is to do that. So there's some differentiation. You can prefer some of the peripherals or the weight or the shading, but it's still very clearly a laptop.
Yeah, but when I got a laptop running Red Hat versus a laptop running CentOS versus a laptop running Ubuntu, they're pretty different. I need to figure out.
They are pretty different. If we as the OpenStack Foundation, if we as the project don't do our job right, then that's what's going to happen. Then what we're going to see is we're going to see Red Hat's OpenStack and Canonical's OpenStack and SUSE's OpenStack and IBM's OpenStack, and they're all going to be like CentOS versus Ubuntu versus whatever, and they're going to be different experiences because they're all trying to lock you in. But I don't want them to lock you into something. I want those experiences to be similar enough so that you as a customer are actually getting, so that if we've got 8 different public clouds out there all running OpenStack, you as a consumer can go to each one of them and know what to expect. And that's
so I got time for one more quick question because I'm almost over time. I actually can't see the clock.
I can't either. Yeah.
But I do want to point out, Matthew's saying we're really easy to leave. You're saying we want to make it really easy to leave too. So this idea of making it really easy to leave the one you love is, I think Sting would approve. I do want to give you, Jim,
being open,
a chance to chime in. You've been quiet on some of this stuff. Let me ask a difficult question. I know you guys do OpenStack and you do Cloud Platform and a bunch of other things. In the Cloud Platform world, there's Citrix. Cloud Platform has a very different heritage from the Cloud.com world.
Cloud Stack.
And, Cloud Stack has a very different heritage, and that led to Cloud Platform. Is Citrix helping or hindering the Cloud Platform, Cloud Stack marketing?
That's a good question. Obviously they're in business to make money as well. They're a longtime customer of ours. I don't have an opinion, and I don't know that the company that I work for has an opinion as to whether or not they're helping or hindering. I think the Stack Wars, though, they're a good thing to have. Innovation happens through competition. If there's nobody competing, then innovation slows down and nobody wins. So and so while the Stack Wars are going on and all the developers are contributing to their open source foundations, we'll sell them some cloud services so they can spin up virtual machines and do their compiles and their testing and everything else. So besides that, we'll have to wait and see how it all shakes out. I think that over time, obviously it looks like there's somebody leading the way at this point, but it's the race is never over until it's over. So let's see what the future brings.
Great. All right. Thank you all very much for being so candid and being good sports about this. Some unusually blunt discussion about this, and hopefully some good tweets out of it too. So thank you all very much.